evening. How do you do?
In 1963, four smiling backbeat marauders from Liverpool launched an invasion on American soil that was so devastating to pop culture, its effect can be traced to virtually every piece of music released afterwards. Almost the moment this troupe finally disbanded in 1970, a replacement squad from Birmingham embarked on their own path of destruction. However, these four didn't smile as much, and the impact wasn't as immediately obvious. Make no mistake, however, it was an invasion, and it was just as important. One might say these two bands were the bookends for the cultural revolution that occurred in the 1960s, while the Beatles entered at the embryonic beginnings of the social transformation that they in essence laid out the soundtrack to. Black Sabbath was there to clean up the aftermath and disillusionment that ultimately prevailed. Perhaps there are other choices one could turn to in order to represent this sentiment, but you would be hard-pressed to find more perfect microcosms in both lyrical themes and musical stylings. Despite their initial popularity, the Beatles began with a rather humble creativity. Some 40% of their first albums were covers of American R&B and rock tunes. What set them apart was the energy and innocence in which they projected these songs. They loved music, and it showed. This love would steadily flourish into groundbreaking directions never before explored. There was no territory off limits, no experiment that wasn't developed into technique. From sonic tweaks with phase to fuzz to completely dissolving conventional ideas of song structure, the Beatles not only invaded, but explored and pioneered the areas that no one else was willing to touch. While such diversions usually begin to separate a band from mainstream appeal, the Beatles managed to always glue their endeavors together with a solid and unified drive that was not only catchy, but infectious. This ability to consistently open the right doors never faded, but instead climaxed at the end of their career. Yet the end never accompanied the breakup. Instead, the crescendo reverberated for years to come, and still echoes strongly. Enter Black Sabbath. Unlike the Fab Four, Sabbath had a distinction and ingenuity from the very start. 1970 was the dawn of a dark decade. The hope that pervaded the 1960s was either strung out or assassinated, and it was too easy to give in to the incessant gloom that persisted. The major threats of the 60s, like Vietnam and the Cold War, were slowly fading as iconic terror beacons, but instead, the world drifted into something even more terrifying, albeit subtle: apathy. Apathy's byproduct is, unavoidably, despair and incompleteness. Sabbath didn't make music you danced to. They made music you brooded to, reaching a core in the human experience that few want to touch in its raw form. So Iommi, Butler, Ward, and Osborne distilled it into something manageable. It was an angry shout and a mourning wail that lamented the state of affairs and mocked the naivety that caused it. It's no surprise then, caught in a period so numbing and directionless, that instead of climaxing in creative genius, Sabbath instead became a caricature of themselves, eventually striving to imitate the new breed of artists that were influenced by the sound Sabbath had initially created. Ironic and fitting. From the indie singer-songwriter to the staunch headbanger, these two artists are nothing short of banners that endlessly wave and herald the passing movements in rock and roll. From punk to metal, grunge, and alternative, the roots all lead to the same place. Certainly they go even deeper than Sabbath or the Beatles, but they cannot get there without passing the bedrock these two groups laid.
Said song.